Last thing I'm talking about today is some news coming out of the Pentagon, and maybe the biggest and most interesting story is what's happening with some former Trump administration Pentagon officials who are now signing agreements and joining the boards of these smaller tech firms. And so there's some statements in here from people who follow the placement on these boards and everything. And it's not like a critical take on this or anything like that, but they're just explaining that one of the reasons that these former military people are former Pentagon staffers and everything are joining these smaller tech firms is because it gives them a lot of power in these tech firms. If you go and you're, a senior or not a senior, an undersecretary of state or something like that, and you join the board of Raytheon, it's probably more of a token position and just, so you could call up your buddy who still works at the Pentagon and try to get them to buy Lockheed products versus if you're on the board of one of these small companies, they're really going to look for you to guide the company and what the company does. And so it highlights Ryan McCarthy, who was, I believe, the Undersecretary of State and the Army Secretary. And he has joined the board of Tomahawk Robotics and is steering that company, but then also joined the board of Scout Ventures, which is the parent company of Tomahawk Robotics, and has joined the Austin, Texas-based tech company StriveWorks, and then the board of the more traditional defense contractor CI. Mark Esper, the former Secretary of Defense, along with James Hundo Goots, has joined the board of Espis or Apyrus, and this is another tech company. And I believe Gutis was a former undersecretary who was involved in acquisitions. Will Roper, a former Pentagon official, has joined Volason, and then Ellen Lord has joined Voyage Space Holdings. And, these are just a few examples of people outlined in this article, but this is an overall trend that's happening. And, one of the bigger things that could happen here, of course, is that all these companies, of course, do more business with the Pentagon and exploit the ties of all these former Pentagon officials. But also all these tech companies are going to be steered towards the massive Pentagon honeypot, and they're no longer going to be designing technologies that, make me and you and our lives easier and better and everything like that, but rather just, making technologies that help the Pentagon kill people and, earning themselves Pentagon contracts and Pentagon money, which, really doesn't translate to anything productive. The U.S. and Israel are testing the Arrow 3 missile defense system. This is a joint missile defense system project. And the idea is that these Arrow 3 missiles would hit their targets so high in the atmosphere, it would reduce the amount of debris that could come down and potentially kill people. Another potential use, though, is because it fires so high, or these could be anti-satellite weapons. And of course, the U.S. has talked about potentially having to deal with Russia against the anti-satellite weapons. I think China included in that too. On space war, gotta talk about here. NATO is saying that an attack in space could trigger war with the alliance, essentially saying a potential attack like on a German defense satellite could trigger Article 5 and it be treated as an attack, say, like, on a German military base or something like that. Collective defense, or going to war. And while maybe an attack on like a German satellite would be a pretty clear example of an offensive military attack. Say it's not, so obvious if Russia, claims that they're carrying out a test and they hit one of their own satellites and the debris from that satellite takes out, 4 or 5 other satellites or something like that, including a German defense satellite. Then is Germany going to claim that that was an intentional attack or something like that and try to invoke Article 5? I think that that's something that we have to possibly consider when we're saying that an attack in space is going to provoke Article 5. It's not always just as clear as they like to make it sound. The Pentagon's awarding some contracts. $32 million is going to Geosat to produce some sensors and prototypes for space-based sensors. Not exactly sure of what all this is going to be yet, but the Space Force is handing out money. The Pentagon is going to spend $52 million in 2022 on blimps that have a bunch of spy technology in them to surveil the southern border. The Red Hills fuel tanks that are in Honolulu, Hawaii, and I've been talking about on the show for several months now because fuel is leaking from those tanks, poisoning the drinking water of the people who live around these fuel tanks, which is mainly like the families and U.S. sailors and everything like that. And so the Navy has now said that an operator error caused the fuel spills, and that they're going to, I think, close a couple of these tanks, not the whole facility, but a couple of tanks. I'm going to continue to follow this and see what the Navy actually does. They're talking about this now because all the big Hawaiian, national level politicians, their congressmen, their senators are involved in everything, and they're saying they're going to address this problem, but bureaucracy words, they're probably going to drag their feet and then not do anything about it, refill the tanks and say that they fixed the problem when maybe they really haven't. So talking about the USS Carl Vinson, this is a U.S. aircraft carrier that's been carrying out some operations in the South China Sea. It was carrying out operations with the USS Essex around the Paracel Islands that are claimed by China in the South China Sea, and now it's back in the South China Sea carrying out operations with the other U.S. aircraft carrier, the USS Abraham Lincoln. So there's 2 aircraft carrier strike groups right now in the South China Sea, and of course that's intimidating and very provocative towards China. But one thing that we have to note is one of these aircraft carriers is suffering a lot of mishaps in the past 2 months. The Carl Vinson has suffered, I believe now, 5 Class A mishaps. Those are ones that cause over $2.5 million in damage. Although it being a Class A mishap, that is the upper level, and so it's 2.5 million or more. I'm guessing more could mean 10, 15, 20 million dollars or more. And so there were 4 of them right near the end of the year, and then just today 7 sailors were injured after a landing incident with an F-35 on the deck of the ship. Not exactly clear what happened. It was a F-35C, and 7 people were injured. I believe 4 were medevaced off the ship, and most of them are reported to be doing fairly well, so it doesn't seem like it's going to kill anybody or anything like that, but likely caused a lot of money worth of damage. The pilot had to eject from the plane, so not sure exactly what happened to the plane, but if it was landing and had a mishap, it could have been like lost to the sea or something like that. These are multi-million-dollar equipment, or it could have sustained a lot of damage. So this could be in part because of maybe people not doing a very good job or something like that. Maybe there's a lack of equipment, replacement parts and everything, and so the pilots aren't getting as much training time as they should, and so they're making mistakes that they normally wouldn't if they got as much training time as they should. Remember, towards the end of Obama's administration, 2015, 2016, the 7th Fleet, Indo-PACOM, the area of the world we're talking about here, had several incidents. The USS McCain, the USS USS Fitzgerald, running into other ships, this resulting in dead sailors, dead civilians. And so it wouldn't be unheard of if there are, operations in this part of the world that are happening where there's, not enough equipment and, things aren't being done right. And people are going to start dying and, accidents are already piling up because of it. Really have to wonder if there are that many accidents happening on that ship, if what we need to be doing is sending it constantly on these deployments to the South China Sea. Two more stories here before we wrap up. The Tennessee National Guard is deploying some soldiers, I think 20 or 25 in total. 75 soldiers to Kuwait, and then the Washington National Guard is deploying 100 soldiers to Poland. And so, this is at a time where a lot of National Guards are being used in the United States for COVID and all this other stuff, supply chain issues. And yet, the U.S. military continues to co-opt them, take them and put them in places overseas to do God knows what. What is 100 National Guardsmen going to do in Poland if Russia invaded that, a completely insignificant and inconsequential number of troops? Maybe they're a tripwire. We could say more Americans died and that would provoke more calls to go to war and everything like that. But, these are actual people who could be doing actual things in the United States. Not that I'm the biggest fan of deploying the National Guard for everything, but if the U.S. government's making it impossible for, people to work in nursing homes and things like that, and better to have the National Guard there, I guess, than, people die of neglect and everything because there's no staff for the nursing homes. So continuing to deploy them overseas seems absolutely pointless.